Good afternoon. How are you today? Well, the temperature feels good, but I may be wearing more clothes than I need. And Jefferson's report would be we're in the low 40s, and there's a couple of miles an hour wind, and the sun is out. And I think the sun often makes the biggest difference unless the wind is greater. So that's Thomas Jefferson's report today. When we're looking at what's going on, I think we should spend a little time applying principles to practice. So I think it's the responsibility of voters, officials, and the media to get the facts straight, to know and appreciate there's a toxin, lies, in our public discourse. And we have to, therefore, analyze what's said or discount what is said by this factor of poisoning that's occurred in our exercise of free speech. And there are lots of examples of this. One of them, and it's not minor because it means that we have to question everything else in the neighborhood of the statement. On the Talking Heads today, there was a question about, in the race in South Carolina, how many delegates did Haley get? Now, the actual answer is 0, because it's a winner-take-all state. But she was told to have gotten perhaps 4 delegates, running down, following a theme that she was just crushed by Trump. And in the sense of how many delegates she was entitled to, since winner takes all, the answer was none. But normally, if it was a state in which they were apportioned, she would have gotten perhaps a percentage of her vote. So Trump got 3 out of 5 votes. She got 2 out of 5. If the number of delegates was 50, and I believe the number is 50, if it were apportioned, and remember it was not, she would get 20 votes and he would get 30. But the way it was set up, and there's a history about how these votes are divided and a lot of fighting and so forth about it. If the votes were apportioned, she would get 20 votes. But that's not the significance of her performance in South Carolina. The significance is, how do we describe it, and what is its real significance? Now, to say that Trump crushed her, and not to say, how are the voters reconciling the fact of Trump's multiple indictments and 2 impeachments and court proceedings with huge multi-million-dollar judgments against him? How do we reconcile supporting a candidate like that? Years ago, a male candidate found in the wrong bedroom when married was enough to destroy his candidacy. Thinking of Hart, Gary Hart. Now, we have a candidate from the street, from the grimy, dark, dystopic, babbling, oily origins of this planet, who's running for office, and he doesn't have to be smart. He doesn't have to be good. He doesn't have to be Christian. He doesn't have to be clear. He can be a clown, because some people are getting what they want. And that's it. And that kind of discussion of the election is rarely had. I mean, we have experts on the air, but very few, and I've heard several who did the right thing, very few go on and talk about what is the significance. So if you're a host? Do you say, did Trump crush Haley last night? Or affirmatively, Trump crushed Haley last night? Or do we say, Haley bested the polling numbers that Trump had, doubled them because he thought she'd be at 20 and she's at 40. And so what does this mean going forward? How does a candidate run for president when he's going to lose 40% of the Republican vote in the general election? Now, actually, the polls indicate that 10% will not vote for Trump if he's the nominee, those who voted against him. So, how do you deal with that political reality? And shouldn't we be discussing that in some detail? Now, what if Trump can't go forward and Haley gets the crown? Then what happens? Is she a stronger candidate against Biden than Trump would be? She says that's so. But how will the Republicans react to her? Will they stay away? Will they go with her? Will they go to one of the other independents? That's the game. That's the suspense in politics. And I'm somewhat of an obsessive, so I follow these things. And the delegates, well, that could get very complicated. We may hearken back to the old undemocratic days of conventions in which there were repeated ballots to pick the nominee because they thought that person would be the best candidate going forward. So could that happen at the convention? I've been to a number of Democratic conventions, and there have been floor fights and so forth. And so I've seen that. I've never been at a Republican convention, but they have a similar chaos to them. That is, once they get away from what they purport is the standard by which they choose their standard bearer, and that is, how do they do with the delegates? So, what does Haley do when she has played out her hand as a candidate still standing against Trump past, Super Tuesday coming up? And the answer may be she goes independent. She never supports Trump, and her long game would be, well, I'll be back in 4 years. I'll take this, hold on to it, and then run when Trump is out of office or Biden is out of office, depending on the election. So that's kind of what the discussion should be. But we too easily give to Trump language he embraces and loves so much. Now, let's talk about how we could lose our critical faculties. When Trump says, "You embraced my mugshot," to persons of color, to black Americans, what is he doing? When he says blacks are hurt so badly and discriminated against, and the blacks realize that's happening to me, and that's why persons of color are voting for me. Now, he's saying two things there that are quite spectacular and brazen, but they've had, if you will, better agitprop, better propaganda than the Democrats have. And I say this as I'm bleeding from every pore, metaphorically, that that's the case. And in this instance, what they're saying is, I'm just like you. I'm a victim of the system. But Trump doesn't believe for a minute that blacks are being set upon by a bigoted system. No. And you may remember speeches in which he said to law enforcement officers, and when you put them in that car, you don't have to put your hand on their head. You can bang it a little bit if you want. Who was he talking about? Same kind of argument he was making about our borders. We don't want non-whites in this country. That's what he's saying. And so how does a person who's black or white reconcile these statements? Well, the simplest understanding is he'll say whatever it takes to get a vote and mean none of it. But when he makes an admission, you know that's true. And we have so many data points for him, you know, looking back at Charlottesville, one of the inspirational moments that brought Biden into the contest in the first place, the first election that he was in. We know Trump is a racist. There's no question about it. And when he's squeezed, he slips the punch. And Democrats, hosts, opinion leaders, let him do it. Now, what was the percentage of the white vote in this election that went to Trump? It was 92% white. That's who expect him. And so, what is Trump doing? Does he expect a large black turnout for himself? No. He just wants to get enough votes that in the battleground states, he can get the electors so that he can win with another plurality of the vote in the general election. That's it. But he has a problem. And he has everybody pressing Haley to get out now or soon, because he figures the longer she's in, the more he has to be concerned about two things. One is that she's creating a stable opposition to Trump that either Biden or Haley or someone else can take advantage of in the general election. So there are a lot of indicators in the polling. I made some remarks on Twitter earlier today. But one of the interesting ones was that in Charleston, Haley got 80% of that vote. That's a scary number for any candidate who hopes to go all the way to get the nomination and then have to run. So, what is the upshot of my ramblings amidst the trees today? It is that we have to help all those in the discussions who get it wrong. Hit an email. You know, yes, people misspeak, and I don't think for an instant getting how the delegate system worked in South Carolina was that big a deal. But it tells us that errors are made, and in this environment, they can make a big difference when we, in my opinion, the Democrats, the independents, the fallen Republicans who can't put up with this anymore, we hear it and we say, well, that's not right. And it puts ink in the water. It puts a difficulty for us to believe everything else that is said. And that we can't accept this year. We have to get it right, myself included. So, I say to you, it's been wonderful walking amidst the cathedral of trees today. And if I can, I'll be out and talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.